Step into a world where survival means mastering techniques that modern technology still can't match. In the endless white expanse of the Arctic tundra, where temperatures drop to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and survival depends on reading invisible signs beneath 3 feet of solid ice, the Inuit people have achieved something remarkable. For over 4,000 years, they've mastered the art of coaxing life from what appears to be a frozen wasteland. Watch as weathered hands test ice thickness with a traditional bone probe, listening for the subtle sounds that reveal safety and abundance below. Here, where families depended entirely on these techniques for survival, failure wasn't just disappointing, it meant starvation. While modern ice fishermen often return home empty-handed after hours of waiting, Inuit masters regularly brought home enough fish to feed entire families using techniques you're about to discover. Feel the bite of Arctic wind cutting through layers of traditional sealskin clothing as you witness knowledge that has kept communities alive through the harshest conditions on Earth. This isn't recreational fishing, this is life or death mastery passed down through countless generations of Arctic survivors. Hear the deep groaning of shifting ice beneath your feet as you realize that every movement, every decision, every technique represents thousands of years of refined knowledge. The Inuit peoples across Alaska, northern Canada, and Greenland didn't just survive in this environment, they thrived, developing fishing methods so effective that modern experts still turn to these ancient techniques when everything else fails. Navy SEALs training in Arctic survival learn these exact methods because they work when modern equipment breaks down in extreme cold. Survival instructors teaching military personnel rely on traditional techniques because synthetic materials fail and electronic devices die, but ancestral wisdom endures. Professional Arctic guides who stake their reputations on client success have discovered that abandoning modern gear in favour of traditional methods dramatically improves their results. Observe the careful positioning that turns frozen lakes into abundant fishing grounds, where knowing the right spots means the difference between feast and famine. Picture the focused concentration required as skilled fishermen read almost imperceptible signs that indicate fish presence below thick ice. These aren't lucky guesses, they're the result of sophisticated understanding of Arctic marine ecosystems that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. Scientists studying traditional knowledge have found that ancestral techniques work because they're based on deep understanding of fish behaviour, ice formation patterns, and seasonal changes that took centuries to perfect. Climate researchers studying ice patterns now consult traditional Inuit knowledge because it's often more accurate than satellite data when predicting local conditions. Watch as expert hands demonstrate the methodical creation of fishing holes, each positioned with mathematical precision based on centuries of accumulated wisdom. Feel the rhythm as experienced fishermen show the hypnotic jigging motion that has called fish from Arctic depths for millennia. The traditional tools, carved from bone, shaped from antler, and crafted from sinew, might look simple, but they represent engineering solutions perfectly adapted to their environment. In this harsh landscape where temperatures plummet far below what most people can imagine surviving, entire communities depended on these fishing techniques during the long Arctic winter. When storms trapped villages for weeks and no other food sources existed, these methods meant survival. The knowledge wasn't just helpful, it was essential for life itself. Professional ice fishing guides today are rediscovering what Arctic peoples never forgot, that understanding the environment beats trying to overpower it with technology. Modern fish finders fail in extreme cold, synthetic lines become brittle and snap, and electronic equipment drains batteries that can't hold charge in frigid temperatures. But traditional bone lures keep working, natural materials stay flexible, and ancestral knowledge guides fishermen to success even in the worst conditions. Transport yourself to the pre-dawn darkness of an Arctic fishing expedition, where aurora lights dance overhead and the only sounds are wind across ice and the patient movements of hunters who know that stealth and timing matter more than brute force. Here, success comes from reading subtle environmental signs, the way wind affects ice formation, how fish respond to pressure changes, and where thermal layers create feeding opportunities beneath the frozen surface. The sophistication of these techniques becomes clear when you realize they weren't developed through trial and error by individuals, but refined over thousands of years by entire communities whose survival depended on getting every detail right. Each generation added to the knowledge base, perfecting techniques that would keep their children and grandchildren alive in one of Earth's most challenging environments. Journey back to when these weren't ancient techniques but cutting-edge survival technology developed by some of history's most successful Arctic specialists. Enter the realm where necessity forced innovation, and innovation meant the difference between communities that thrived and communities that disappeared. Modern survival experts who train people for extreme conditions always come back to the same conclusion. When your life depends on getting food in Arctic conditions, traditional Inuit methods work better than anything modern technology has produced. The techniques you're about to learn have been tested not in laboratories or controlled conditions, but in real-world survival situations where failure meant death. Witness the moment when ancient wisdom meets modern necessity, as today's Arctic professionals recognise that the most advanced fishing techniques ever developed weren't created in research facilities, but perfected on frozen lakes by people whose lives depended on absolute mastery of their craft. To understand why Inuit ice fishing techniques work so well, we need to journey back through thousands of years of Arctic innovation. The story begins long before the Thule culture that most people know about. It starts with the remarkable Paleo-Inuit peoples, also called Dorset culture, who first mastered Arctic survival around 2500 BCE. Picture ancient hunters crossing the frozen Bering Land Bridge, carrying with them the skills that would evolve into the most effective ice fishing methods ever developed. These early Arctic specialists faced challenges that would defeat modern survival experts. They had to create everything they needed to survive from the materials around them. Bone, antler, stone, and sinew became the building blocks of sophisticated technology. The Dorset people lived in the Arctic for over 4,000 years, developing the foundation skills that later cultures would build upon. They learned to read ice conditions with deadly accuracy, understanding that a single mistake could mean falling through thin ice into water so cold that survival time is measured in minutes. They discovered which fish species stayed active under ice when they fall, and how to call them up from the depths. Watch as generations of knowledge accumulated through trial and error, where each successful technique meant the difference between a family that survived winter and one that didn't. Environmental pressures in the Arctic demanded absolute perfection. There was no room for techniques that worked only sometimes. Everything had to work every time, in conditions that would challenge our best modern equipment. Then, around 1000 CE, came the Thule culture, the direct ancestors of modern Inuit peoples. These remarkable innovators emerged from coastal Alaska and brought with them revolutionary improvements in Arctic fishing technology. They developed the toggling harpoon made from bone, antler, and ivory that could secure large fish beneath thick ice. They perfected techniques for creating and maintaining fishing holes in ice up to 7 feet thick. Feel the weight of cultural responsibility as elders passed down fishing knowledge to wide-eyed children whose lives would depend on mastering every detail. In Thule communities, learning to fish through ice wasn't optional education. It was survival training that began in early childhood and continued throughout life. The Thule culture spread with remarkable speed across the Arctic, reaching Greenland by the 13th century. This rapid expansion wasn't conquest, it was the spread of superior survival technology. Communities that learned Thule fishing methods thrived, while those that didn't often disappeared during harsh winters. Archaeological evidence from sites across Nunavut shows the sophisticated bone and antler fishing implements that made this success possible. Envision Thule settlements along the Arctic coastline, where ingenious ice fishing innovations emerged through centuries of refinement. The settlements weren't temporary camps, but permanent communities sustained by fishing techniques so effective they could support families through 8-month winters when other food sources disappeared. Transport yourself to a world where understanding sea ice formation patterns meant the difference between abundance and starvation. Thule fishermen learned that seawater freezes at minus 1.8 degrees Celsius, about 28 degrees Fahrenheit, but they also understood the subtle differences in ice quality, thickness, safety that modern instruments struggle to measure. They could tell by sound, appearance, and even smell whether ice would support their weight and provide good fishing conditions. Scientists studying traditional knowledge have discovered that Thule fishing tools found at archaeological sites are more sophisticated than many modern designs. The bone lures were carved to create specific vibration patterns that attracted Arctic fish species. The fishing lines made from sinew were stronger and more flexible in extreme cold than the modern synthetic materials. The hooks carved from ivory and antler were perfectly shaped for Arctic fish species' mouth structures. Watch skilled artisans demonstrate the methodical creation of these tools, understanding that each piece represented weeks of careful work. A single fishing implement might use materials from caribou antler, walrus ivory, seal sinew, and specially selected stones, all combined with knowledge passed down through generations about which materials worked best in different conditions. The Thule people faced environmental challenges that would overwhelm modern survival experts. Arctic ocean temperatures that turn exposed skin frostbitten in minutes, wind chills that make metal tools dangerous to touch, seasonal light variations that meant fishing in total darkness for months at a time, sea ice formation patterns that changed fishing locations daily. These ancestors developed knowledge systems so sophisticated that climate researchers studying ice patterns today still consult traditional Inuit knowledge because it's more accurate than satellite data for predicting local conditions. Traditional knowledge keepers can predict ice formation, fish behaviour, and weather patterns with precision that amazes modern scientists. Journey back to when these communities had to achieve near-perfect success rates during critical fishing seasons. While modern recreational fishermen can return home empty-handed without serious consequences, Thule families face starvation if their fishing techniques failed. This life-or-death pressure drove innovation that created the most effective ice fishing methods ever developed. Enter the realm where multi-generational knowledge transfer meant survival. Elders didn't just teach fishing techniques, they passed down complete understanding of Arctic ecosystems. Children learned to read wind patterns that affected fish behaviour, understand ice sounds that indicated safety or danger, and recognise environmental signs that predicted the best fishing conditions. The regional variations among Thule communities led to the modern Inuit groups we know today. The Inuit people of Alaska developed techniques adapted to Beaufort Sea conditions. Canadian Inuit communities across Nunavut, Nunavik, Nunatsiavut, and the Inuvialuit settlement region refined methods for different Arctic environments. The Kala-Alit people of Greenland created innovations specific to their unique coastal conditions. Archaeological sites across these regions show remarkable consistency in fishing tool design, proving that the most effective techniques spread throughout Thule communities. Excavations at sites in Nunavut have revealed preserved organic materials including bonefish hooks, antler lure components, and sinew fishing lines that demonstrate the sophistication of traditional technology. Observe as ancient hands worked with materials that required perfect understanding of their properties. Caribou antler had to be aged properly before carving. Walrus ivory needed specific treatments to prevent cracking in extreme cold. Seal sinew required careful preparation to create fishing lines stronger than modern alternatives. The Thule people also understood Arctic fish behaviour with scientific precision. They knew which species stayed active under ice when they fed most actively, and how to predict their movements based on weather patterns and seasonal changes. This knowledge came from thousands of winters of careful observation, passed down through oral traditions that preserved critical survival information. Step into the world where traditional ecological knowledge represented the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. Thule communities developed understanding of ice acoustics, how sound travels through ice and water to locate fish. They learned thermal dynamics, how temperature layers beneath ice affected fish behaviour. They mastered seasonal timing, knowing exactly when different species would be most active and accessible. Modern marine biologists studying Arctic ecosystems find that traditional knowledge often provides insights that years of scientific research miss. Traditional fishing calendars based on environmental observations prove more accurate than modern fish behaviour predictions. Traditional understanding of ice conditions helps researchers interpret data that instruments alone cannot fully explain. The cultural foundation these ancestors built wasn't just about techniques, it was about developing the patience, observation skills, and environmental sensitivity required for Arctic survival. Traditional ice fishing demanded qualities that modern life rarely develops: the ability to remain completely still for hours, to read subtle environmental signs, and to make life-or-death decisions based on accumulated wisdom rather than technological assistance. This foundation of cultural wisdom and environmental mastery led to the development of specific techniques so effective that they sustained Arctic communities for millennia. Now let's dive into the exact methods these remarkable ancestors perfected. Now comes the moment you've been waiting for, the exact techniques that kept Inuit families alive through countless Arctic winters. These aren't simple fishing methods. There are sophisticated survival systems that combine engineering, biology, and generations of life-or-death experience into approaches so effective that modern experts still can't improve upon them. Step into the early morning darkness as an experienced Inuit fisherman approaches a frozen lake. Before taking a single step onto the ice, watch as weathered hands produce a traditional probing tool carved from dense caribou antler. This isn't just checking if ice will hold weight, it's reading an entire underwater ecosystem through sound, vibration and visual clues. Listen as the probe taps against the ice surface, creating different tones that reveal thickness, density and hidden dangers. Solid ice produces a clear, sharp ring. Thin ice gives a dull thud. Honeycombed ice, dangerous ice weakened by current or temperature changes, creates a hollow echoing sound that warns experienced hunters to find another location. Feel the vibrations travel up through the probe as it strikes ice. Strong, consistent vibrations indicate solid, safe ice. Weak or muffled vibrations suggest dangerous conditions that could send a fisherman through the ice into water so cold that survival time is measured in minutes, not hours. Watch as expert eyes examine ice colour and clarity. Blue-black ice is strongest, formed slowly in calm conditions with few air bubbles. White or cloudy ice contains air pockets that weaken its structure. Grey ice often indicates water underneath, while yellow ice suggests dangerous thin spots or spring conditions. The traditional assessment continues with understanding wind patterns and their effect on ice formation. Areas protected from wind develop thicker, more reliable ice. Exposed areas where wind creates currents beneath the ice remain dangerous longer. Traditional knowledge teaches hunters to read landscape features that indicate safe versus risky ice conditions. Observe the careful examination of ice formation patterns that reveal underwater structure. Pressure ridges on the surface indicate stress points below. Smooth areas suggest deep water underneath. Rough, buckled ice often forms over shallow areas with structure that attracts fish. Every surface detail tells part of the story about what lies beneath. Transport yourself to a world where hole placement follows patterns refined over thousands of years. This isn't random positioning, it's strategic deployment based on sophisticated understanding of fish behavior, water currents, and thermal layers beneath ice. Traditional hole spacing follows principles that modern fish finders struggle to replicate. Experienced fishermen place holes based on underwater topography they can read through ice conditions. Drop-offs that concentrate fish are identified by ice formation patterns. Shallow feeding areas reveal themselves through ice coloration and snow distribution. Witness the methodical creation of fishing holes, each positioned with mathematical precision based on centuries of accumulated knowledge. The first hole serves as a scout, testing depth, current, and fish activity. Based on what this hole reveals, additional holes are positioned to create a network that maximizes chances of intercepting moving fish. Feel the rhythm as experienced hands use traditional ice cutting tools to create perfectly sized openings. Too small and large fish escape. Too large and heat loss makes the hole difficult to maintain. Traditional holes are cut square rather than round, a shape that provides better structural integrity and easier maintenance in extreme cold. Picture the intense concentration as fishermen position multiple holes relative to each other. Fish moving along underwater structure can be intercepted by strategic hole placement that anticipates their travel routes. Traditional spacing patterns take advantage of fish movement patterns that remain consistent across generations. The depth calculation uses ancestral knowledge that combines visual ice assessment with understanding of seasonal fish behavior. Winter fish seek specific depth ranges for feeding and shelter. Traditional knowledge identifies these zones through ice conditions, weather patterns, and seasonal timing that electronic equipment cannot fully replicate. Enter the realm where every tool represents survival technology perfected over millennia. Traditional Inuit fishing implements weren't just functional, they were precisely engineered solutions created from materials available in the Arctic environment. Watch skilled hands carve bone lures from available Arctic materials, understanding that each curve and angle affects how the lure moves through water. Traditional lures are carved to mimic specific prey fish that Arctic species pursue. The shape creates vibrations that travel through water, attracting fish from distances that surprise modern anglers. Observe the meticulous creation of fishing hooks from walrus ivory and caribou antler. These materials maintain strength and flexibility in extreme cold when metal hooks become brittle and dangerous to handle. Traditional hook shapes are perfectly matched to Arctic fish species' mouth structures, ensuring secure hook sets that don't allow escape. Feel the texture as expert hands prepare sinew fishing lines that are stronger and more reliable than many modern alternatives. Seal sinew, properly prepared, creates lines that don't freeze, don't break under stress, and don't lose flexibility in extreme cold. The preparation process requires understanding of sinew properties that takes years to master. Journey back to when tool creation was a community effort where knowledge was shared across generations. Elders taught young hunters not just how to carve tools, but why specific shapes worked better than others. Traditional knowledge included understanding of material properties, seasonal variations in material quality, and techniques for maintaining tools in harsh conditions. Experience firsthand how traditional weight selection uses natural stones chosen for specific properties. River stones provide different action than angular rocks. Dense stones sink quickly to desired depths, while lighter stones allow lures to flutter and attract fish. Traditional knowledge includes understanding of how weight affects lure behavior in different water conditions. The crafting process reveals sophisticated understanding of water dynamics and fish behavior. Traditional lures are designed to create specific vibration patterns that trigger feeding responses in Arctic fish species. The curves and surfaces are carved to generate water displacement that fish interpret as prey movement. Witness the moment when ancient wisdom meets practical application. Traditional jigging techniques combine precise hand movements, timing and environmental awareness that modern electronic equipment cannot replicate. Watch as experienced hands demonstrate the hypnotic jigging motion that calls fish from the depths. This isn't random movement. It's rhythmic pattern that mimics injured prey fish struggling near the bottom. The rhythm varies based on fish species, water temperature, and seasonal behavior patterns that traditional knowledge has documented over centuries. Feel the subtle wrist movements that create lifelike lure action. Traditional jigging uses specific hand positions and movement patterns that generate vibrations fish interpret as feeding opportunities. The technique requires developing sensitivity to feel lure movement through thick lines and understanding how different movements affect fish response. Picture the intense concentration as fishermen read almost imperceptible signs that indicate fish presence below. Traditional knowledge teaches hunters to interpret line tension, lure behavior, and even ice vibrations that indicate fish activity. These signs are so subtle that modern instruments often miss them completely. Observe the patient strategies that separate successful traditional fishing from modern approaches. Traditional fishermen understand that fish in extremely cold water move slowly and feed cautiously. Rushing the process or using aggressive techniques often frightens fish away. Traditional patience allows natural feeding behavior to develop. Enter a world where timing optimization follows environmental cues that require years to master. Traditional knowledge includes understanding of daily feeding patterns, weather influences on fish behavior, and seasonal variations that affect fishing success. This timing knowledge allows traditional fishermen to be in the right place at exactly the right moment. The fish calling techniques use sound and vibration principles that modern science is just beginning to understand. Traditional methods create acoustic signatures that attract specific fish species. The techniques work because they replicate natural sounds that indicate feeding opportunities to Arctic fish. Traditional bite indicator reading requires developing sensitivity that modern equipment cannot match. Traditional fishermen learn to feel fish interest, investigation, and commitment through subtle line changes that electronic systems miss. This sensitivity develops through years of practice and allows detection of fish behavior that leads to successful hook sets. Modern marine biologists studying these techniques discover that traditional methods work because they're based on deep understanding of Arctic marine ecosystems. Traditional hole placement takes advantage of fish movement patterns, feeding behaviors, and shelter preferences that remain consistent across generations. Traditional lure design creates vibration frequencies that trigger predatory responses in Arctic fish species. The bone and antler materials produce acoustic signatures that attract fish more effectively than many modern plastic alternatives. Traditional materials also maintain their action in extremely cold water when synthetic materials become rigid. The jigging rhythms developed through traditional knowledge match feeding patterns and prey movement that Arctic fish species recognize as natural food sources. Traditional techniques work because they replicate environmental conditions that fish have evolved to respond to over thousands of years. Traditional timing strategies align with fish behavior patterns that modern research confirms, but traditional knowledge has understood for centuries. Traditional fishermen knew when fish feed most actively, how weather affects their behavior, and where they position themselves during different seasons. Watch as all elements combine into fishing systems that have sustained Arctic communities for millennia. Traditional ice assessment ensures safety while identifying optimal fishing locations. Strategic hole placement maximizes fish interception opportunities. Carefully crafted tools provide reliable function in extreme conditions. Advanced execution techniques optimize fish attraction and capture. The integration reveals why traditional methods achieved success rates that modern recreational fishing rarely matches. Traditional techniques weren't developed for entertainment. They were refined through necessity where failure meant community starvation. This pressure created fishing systems optimized for maximum effectiveness under the harshest possible conditions. Traditional knowledge also includes understanding of fish processing, preservation, and distribution that ensured entire communities benefited from fishing success. Traditional methods weren't just about catching fish, they were complete systems for converting fish into kita, community survival resources. These fundamental techniques represent just the beginning of Inuit ice fishing mastery. The true genius reveals itself in the advanced variations and seasonal adaptations that master practitioners developed for the most challenging Arctic conditions. The techniques you've learned so far represent the foundation of Inuit ice fishing mastery, but true expertise reveals itself in the advanced variations and seasonal adaptations that allowed communities to thrive through Arctic conditions that would defeat modern technology. These sophisticated methods separate survival from abundance, turning harsh Arctic winters into seasons of plenty. Enter a world where fishing success demands different techniques for each phase of the Arctic year. Master fishermen understand that spring break-up, deep winter, fall freeze-up, and even summer present unique opportunities that require specialized approaches developed over centuries. Watch as experienced hunters demonstrate spring break-up fishing techniques, capitalizing on the narrow window when ice begins deteriorating but remains safe enough to fish through. During breakup, fish behavior changes dramatically as increased water flow and changing temperatures trigger feeding activity. Traditional fishermen position themselves to take advantage of fish moving between winter and summer habitats. Spring breakup requires reading ice conditions that change hourly. Traditional knowledge teaches hunters to identify safe ice during deterioration by sound, color, and formation patterns. The techniques for maintaining fishing holes during breakup differ completely from winter methods, requiring constant attention and specialized tools for rapidly changing conditions. Deep winter methods showcase the true genius of traditional ice fishing. When temperatures drop to -60 degrees Fahrenheit and ice thickness reaches maximum levels, traditional techniques become essential for survival. Modern equipment fails at these temperatures. Batteries die, metal becomes brittle, and synthetic materials lose flexibility. Traditional methods using natural materials continue working when everything else stops. Feel the intensity as experienced hunters adapt their techniques for extreme cold conditions. Breathing holes must be maintained differently when exposed water freezes within minutes. Traditional tools require different handling techniques when metal would cause instant frostbite. Fish behavior changes in extremely cold water, requiring modified jigging rhythms and longer patience periods. Full freeze-up presents opportunities that traditional fishermen learn to maximize through precise timing. As ice forms, fish concentrate in specific areas before winter patterns establish themselves. Traditional knowledge includes understanding which locations fish use during ice formation, how to predict safe ice thickness, and when to begin winter fishing patterns. Picture master fishermen reading environmental signs that indicate optimal freeze-up fishing conditions. Wind patterns, temperature changes, and ice formation sounds all provide information about fish location and behavior. Traditional timing strategies allow fishermen to be positioned perfectly as conditions become optimal. Even summer presents opportunities through advanced breathing hole techniques. During brief Arctic summers, traditional fishermen utilize seal breathing holes and natural openings for fishing access. These techniques require understanding marine mammal behavior, tidal patterns, and fish movement that continues even when lakes and rivers are ice-free. Observe the sophisticated hand signals and communication methods that coordinate family fishing groups across vast ice expanses as Arctic storms approach. Traditional storm fishing protocols don't mean avoiding storms, they mean adapting techniques to maintain success even as Arctic winds reach dangerous speeds. Feel the intensity as experienced hunters read subtle changes in wind patterns, atmospheric pressure, and ice behavior that indicate approaching weather changes. Traditional weather prediction methods allow fishermen to position themselves for success during storms rather than simply seeking shelter. Storm fishing requires understanding how severe weather affects fish behavior beneath ice. High winds create underwater currents that move fish to different locations. Atmospheric pressure changes influence fish feeding patterns. Traditional knowledge teaches hunters how to adapt hole placement, jigging techniques, and timing to match fish responses to storm conditions. Traditional equipment protection during storms involves techniques that keep fishing tools functional when modern gear would be destroyed. Natural materials resist storm damage better than synthetic alternatives. Traditional shelter construction allows continued fishing during conditions that would stop modern approaches. Visibility-limited techniques showcase traditional skills that don't depend on sight. When whiteout conditions make navigation impossible, traditional fishermen rely on environmental cues that modern GPS systems cannot provide. Wind direction, ice sounds, and even smell help traditional hunters maintain their position and continue fishing safely. Watch as elder fishermen demonstrate storm fishing techniques, maintaining success even as Arctic winds create conditions that would challenge modern survival equipment. Traditional clothing, tools, and techniques work together as integrated systems designed for the worst possible conditions. Extreme wind adaptations require understanding how wind affects ice conditions, hole maintenance, and fish behavior. Traditional knowledge includes techniques for maintaining fishing holes when wind would normally make fishing impossible, protecting equipment in extreme conditions, and reading fish behavior changes caused by wind-driven underwater currents. Picture master fishermen orchestrating complex networks of fishing holes across entire bays, each position calculated for maximum community benefit rather than individual success. Traditional multi-hole systems represent sophisticated resource management that ensures entire communities benefit from fishing expertise. Multifamily operations coordinate fishing activities across extended family groups, sharing knowledge, equipment, and catch in ways that optimize success for everyone involved. Traditional coordination methods include communication systems, resource sharing protocols, and decision-making processes that maximize community fishing success. Enter the realm where elder-youth teaching occurs during active fishing, transferring traditional knowledge through hands-on experience rather than classroom instruction. Young hunters learn not just techniques, but also environmental awareness, safety protocols, and cultural values that make traditional fishing sustainable across generations. Witness the sophisticated organization of community-wide fishing operations during critical seasons when success means community survival. Traditional leadership structures ensure experienced hunters coordinate activities, share knowledge, and distribute resources in ways that support the entire community through challenging periods. Emergency response fishing demonstrates traditional community mobilization during food crises. When other food sources fail, traditional fishing methods provide reliable backup systems that have prevented starvation in Arctic communities for thousands of years. These emergency protocols involve rapid deployment of fishing expertise, equipment sharing, and coordinated harvesting that maximizes fish catch during critical periods. Traditional resource sharing ensures that fishing success benefits entire communities rather than just successful individual hunters. Sharing protocols, distribution methods, and community storage systems turn individual fishing expertise into community survival resources. Journey across the Arctic to discover how different Inuit communities adapted traditional fishing techniques to their specific environments. Regional variations reflect centuries of adaptation to local conditions, fish species, and environmental challenges unique to each area. Alaskan Inupiat communities developed specialized techniques for Beaufort sea conditions, where different ice patterns, fish species, and seasonal timing required modifications to basic traditional methods. Inupiat innovations include techniques adapted to coastal ice conditions, specialized tools for specific fish species, and timing strategies matched to Alaskan seasonal patterns. Canadian Inuit innovations reflect adaptations for Hudson Bay, Arctic archipelago, and inland fishing conditions that differ significantly from coastal environments. Canadian techniques include methods for different ice types, specialized approaches for various fish species, and community coordination systems adapted to different settlement patterns. Observe the sophisticated adaptations developed by Greenlandic Kalaallit communities for unique Greenland ice conditions. Greenlandic methods reflect adjustments for different climate patterns, ice formation characteristics, and fish behavior specific to Greenland waters. These adaptations demonstrate how traditional knowledge continues evolving to match local conditions. Traditional knowledge sharing between regions shows how different Inuit communities learned from each other while maintaining approaches optimized for their specific environments. Cultural exchange, intermarriage, and trade relationships spread fishing innovations while preserving regional specializations. Step into the world where master fishermen develop innovations that push traditional techniques beyond basic survival into true abundance. Master-level practitioners don't just follow traditional methods, they understand underlying principles well enough to adapt and improve techniques for specific conditions. Traditional weather prediction methods allow master fishermen to predict fishing success days in advance, using environmental signs that modern meteorology is just beginning to understand. Master practitioners read atmospheric pressure through ice behavior, predict fish activity through environmental changes, and position themselves for success before optimal conditions develop. Advanced fish behavior reading skills let master fishermen predict fish movements, feeding patterns, and response to environmental changes with accuracy that amazes modern marine biologists. Master practitioners understand fish psychology, seasonal behavior patterns, and environmental influences that affect fishing success. Expert timing techniques coordinate fishing activities with natural cycles, weather patterns, and fish behavior in ways that maximize success rates far beyond basic traditional methods. Master fishermen time their activities to coincide with optimal fish feeding periods, environmental conditions, and seasonal patterns that create peak fishing opportunities. Leadership in community fishing involves coordinating individual expertise into community success systems. Master fishermen don't just excel individually, they organize community fishing activities, teach techniques to younger hunters, and ensure traditional knowledge continues benefiting entire communities. Enter situations where traditional fishing techniques literally mean the difference between community survival and tragedy. Emergency survival applications showcase traditional methods under conditions where failure is not an option and success requires perfect execution of advanced techniques. Last resort fishing methods include techniques for situations when other food sources have failed. Weather conditions are extreme, and community survival depends entirely on fishing success. These methods push traditional techniques to their absolute limits, requiring master-level skills and community coordination under maximum pressure. Crisis fishing during food shortages demonstrates traditional emergency protocols that mobilize entire communities for maximum fishing effectiveness. These situations require rapid deployment of fishing expertise, equipment sharing, and coordinated harvesting that maximizes catch during limited opportunities. Traditional survival prioritization ensures that emergency fishing focuses on techniques most likely to succeed under specific crisis conditions. Emergency protocols identify which techniques work best during different types of crises, how to adapt methods for extreme conditions, and how to maintain fishing success when normal approaches fail. These advanced traditional methods haven't been forgotten by history. They are actively being studied, adopted, and validated by modern experts who recognize their superiority in Arctic conditions. Picture Navy SEAL trainees on the frozen coast of Kodiak Island, abandoning high-tech fish finders in favor of traditional bone probes that actually work in Arctic conditions. The Naval Special Warfare Cold Weather Detachment Kodiak specifically incorporates traditional techniques into advanced cold weather survival training, because electronic equipment fails when temperatures drop below -30 degrees Fahrenheit. But ancestral methods continue working. Watch as military instructors demonstrate traditional ice assessment techniques to special operations candidates who will deploy to Arctic regions where equipment failure means mission failure or death. Modern ice thickness gauges become unreliable in extreme conditions. GPS systems drain batteries that won't hold charge in severe cold, and synthetic fishing lines become brittle and snap. Traditional methods using natural materials remain functional when everything else stops working. The Canadian Armed Forces Northern Operations programs now integrate indigenous knowledge through Canadian Rangers, local guides who teach traditional survival techniques to military personnel. These programs recognize that traditional knowledge provides crucial capabilities that modern technology cannot replace, especially in emergency situations where soldiers must survive using only what the Arctic environment provides. Enter the realm where US Special Operations Command includes Arctic warfare survival protocols based directly on traditional knowledge. Military planners understand that future conflicts may occur in Arctic regions where traditional survival skills become tactical advantages. Soldiers trained in traditional techniques can operate in conditions that would defeat forces dependent entirely on modern equipment. Coast Guard search and rescue operations increasingly utilize traditional ice assessment methods when conducting emergency responses in Arctic waters. Coast Guard personnel learn traditional techniques for reading ice conditions, understanding weather patterns, and predicting environmental changes that modern instruments struggle to measure accurately. Journey into the world of professional Arctic fishing guides who have discovered that traditional methods dramatically improve their success rates with clients. Licensed guides operating in Alaska, northern Canada, and other Arctic regions report that incorporating traditional techniques transforms their client success rates from disappointing to exceptional. Observe professional guides teaching wealthy clients these time-tested methods, achieving results that modern equipment simply cannot match. Experienced guides find that traditional hole placement, traditional lure techniques, and traditional timing strategies consistently outperform approaches based entirely on modern fish finders and synthetic equipment. Survival training schools across North America now include traditional ice fishing techniques in their wilderness survival curricula. Professional survival instructors recognize that traditional methods work reliably in conditions where modern equipment fails, making them essential skills for anyone who might face Arctic survival situations. University wilderness programs integrate traditional techniques into their outdoor education courses because students need to understand approaches that don't depend on technology. Academic outdoor programs teach traditional methods not as historical curiosities, but as practical skills that remain relevant for modern outdoor professionals. Expedition leaders planning Arctic research trips, adventure travel, and polar exploration increasingly incorporate traditional knowledge into their preparation and equipment planning. Professional expedition planners understand that traditional techniques provide backup capabilities when a modern equipment fails in extreme conditions. Watch as university researchers carefully document traditional techniques, amazed at the sophisticated understanding of marine biology embedded in ancestral methods. Research institutions, including the University of Alaska Fairbanks, conduct studies comparing traditional and modern fishing effectiveness in Arctic conditions. Marine biology validation studies confirm that traditional fish behavior understanding often proves more accurate than modern fish behavior predictions. Researchers studying Arctic char, lake trout, and other northern species find that traditional knowledge includes insights into fish behavior that years of scientific research missed. Academic researchers investigating traditional lure effectiveness discover that bone and antler materials create acoustic signatures that attract Arctic fish species more effectively than many modern plastic alternatives. The natural materials produce vibration patterns that fish have evolved to recognize as food sources over thousands of years. Climate research applications increasingly incorporate traditional knowledge when studying how environmental changes affect Arctic ecosystems. Traditional knowledge keepers can predict ice formation, fish behavior changes, and seasonal variations with accuracy that complements modern scientific instruments. Anthropological documentation projects work to preserve traditional techniques not just as cultural artifacts, but as practical knowledge systems that remain relevant for modern applications. Academic institutions recognize that traditional knowledge represents sophisticated understanding of Arctic ecosystems developed through thousands of years of direct observation. Enter research facilities where scientists document the effectiveness of traditional methods through controlled studies and comparative analyses. Research programs examine why traditional techniques work so well, providing scientific explanations for ancestral innovations that remained mysteries until modern investigation. Arctic Research Foundation. Comparative analyses demonstrate that traditional methods consistently achieve higher success rates than modern recreational fishing approaches in similar conditions. The studies show that traditional techniques work because they're based on accurate understanding of fish behavior, environmental conditions, and ecological relationships. University research on Arctic fish species confirms that traditional knowledge of fish behavior, seasonal patterns, and environmental responses often proves more accurate than modern scientific predictions. Traditional fishing calendars based on environmental observations consistently outperform modern fish activity forecasts. Scientific analysis of traditional lure design reveals that ancestral innovations create vibration frequencies and visual presentations that trigger feeding responses in Arctic fish species. The bone, antler, and ivory materials produce acoustic signatures that modern synthetic materials cannot replicate effectively. Research on traditional ice assessment techniques shows that ancestral methods for evaluating ice safety, thickness, and fishing potential often provide more reliable information than modern electronic instruments. Traditional assessment combines multiple environmental indicators that electronic devices cannot measure simultaneously. Feel the weight of professional recognition as a military survival instructors document training effectiveness improvements when traditional techniques are integrated into modern survival programs. Military training reports show that personnel trained in traditional methods demonstrate better survival outcomes in Arctic conditions. Professional Arctic guides report dramatic client success improvements after learning traditional techniques from indigenous knowledge keepers. Guides who incorporate traditional methods into their services consistently achieve better results than competitors using only modern equipment and techniques. Academic researchers studying traditional knowledge publicly acknowledge the sophistication and effectiveness of ancestral methods. University scientists working with indigenous communities recognize that traditional knowledge often provides insights that modern research methods missed. Arctic expedition leaders recommend traditional method adoption based on real-world experience with equipment failure and extreme conditions. Professional expedition planners understand that traditional techniques provide essential backup capabilities that can mean the difference between success and disaster. Step into training facilities where modern professionals learn to combine traditional techniques with contemporary safety equipment. The most effective modern approaches integrate traditional knowledge with modern safety protocols, creating hybrid systems that maximize both effectiveness and safety. Witness the development of training programs that teach traditional techniques alongside modern safety procedures. Professional programs recognize that traditional methods provide core capabilities, while modern safety equipment provides additional protection and communication capabilities. Enter educational institutions where traditional knowledge is studied not as historical artifact, but as continuing innovation. Universities and research institutions work with indigenous communities to document and preserve traditional knowledge while studying its applications for modern challenges. Watch as professional outdoor industries develop equipment and services that incorporate traditional knowledge principles. Modern outdoor companies design products that work with traditional techniques rather than replacing them, recognizing that ancestral innovations often cannot be improved upon. Journey into research programs where traditional knowledge helps scientists understand how climate change affects Arctic ecosystems. Traditional knowledge keepers provide baseline information about historical conditions that helps researchers understand current environmental changes. Arctic researchers studying ice pattern changes, fish behavior modifications, and seasonal timing shifts find that traditional knowledge provides crucial historical context for understanding current trends. Traditional observations spanning generations provide data that modern instruments cannot replicate. Environmental research programs studying Arctic ecosystem changes increasingly rely on traditional knowledge to understand complex relationships between climate, ice conditions, fish behavior, and seasonal patterns. Traditional knowledge provides insights into ecosystem functions that modern research methods struggle to capture. Research institutions studying Arctic environmental changes work directly with indigenous communities to combine traditional knowledge with modern scientific methods. These collaborative approaches produce more complete understanding of Arctic ecosystem changes than either traditional knowledge or modern science could achieve alone. With this scientific validation and professional endorsement, you're ready to learn how to implement these proven techniques in your own modern context, whether for survival preparation or recreational mastery. You can start practicing these life-changing techniques this weekend at any frozen pond. Here's exactly what you need and where to get it. This comprehensive guide transforms ancient wisdom into modern practice, giving you everything needed to safely master traditional Inuit ice fishing methods while respecting their cultural origins. Picture yourself confidently approaching a frozen lake, using traditional ice assessment techniques that have kept Arctic families safe for thousands of years. Your journey begins with mastering basic safety protocols that combine traditional knowledge with modern protective equipment. Start by learning traditional ice evaluation methods that don't require expensive electronic equipment. Traditional assessment begins with visual inspection. Safe ice appears blue, black, and clear, while dangerous ice looks white, grey, or has visible cracks. Practice the traditional sound test using a sturdy stick or traditional probe, listening for the sharp ring of solid ice versus the dull thud of weak ice. Never trust ice less than 4 inches thick for walking, and remember that traditional knowledge teaches us to look for environmental signs that indicate ice strength. Areas protected from wind and current develop stronger ice, while spots near inlets, outlets, or moving water remain dangerous longer. Traditional fishermen always test ice thickness every few steps, never assuming uniform conditions. Modern safety integration means carrying ice picks attached to a rope around your neck, keeping a first aid kit designed for cold weather conditions, and bringing emergency communication devices like satellite communicators for areas without cell coverage. Traditional knowledge emphasizes never fishing alone. Bring a partner for both safety and cultural authenticity. Feel the satisfaction as you craft your first bone lure, connecting with ancestral wisdom through your own hands. Begin with readily available materials from ethical sources. Craft stores sell bone blanks, hunting supply stores offer naturally shed antler pieces, and online retailers provide traditional materials harvested sustainably. For your first lures, focus on simple shapes that mimic small fish. Traditional lure carving uses sharp knives and files to create curved profiles that move naturally through water. Sand the finished lures smooth, then test their action in a bathtub or clear container to ensure they swim properly when jigged. Modern alternatives include dense hardwoods like oak or maple if bone isn't available, but natural materials work better in extreme cold because they don't become brittle like synthetic plastics. Create fishing lines using strong braided materials that maintain flexibility in cold water. Modern synthetic alternatives to traditional sinew include high-quality braided fishing line rated for ice fishing conditions. Understanding fundamental positioning principles means learning to read underwater structure through ice conditions. Traditional knowledge teaches that fish concentrate near drop-offs, underwater points, and areas where different water depth meet. Look for changes in snow cover that indicate underwater features or areas where ice formation appears different. Start with holes spaced 15 to 20 feet apart in a line perpendicular to the shoreline, covering different depth zones from shallow to deep water. Traditional patterns often follow natural contours. Position holes to intercept fish moving along underwater highways rather than random placement. Modern tools like portable fish finders can supplement traditional knowledge, but focus on learning environmental reading skills that work when electronics fail. Traditional fishermen could identify productive areas through ice color, formation patterns, and environmental signs that remain reliable regardless of technology. Watch as your success rate dramatically improves using positioning techniques that modern fish finders cannot replicate. Intermediate development focuses on refining traditional techniques while building environmental awareness that creates consistent success. Traditional lure effectiveness depends on understanding how different materials create specific actions and vibrations. Bone lures from deer or elk leg bones create different swimming actions than antler lures. Practice carving techniques that create lures matched to local fish species. Arctic char require different lure shapes than lake trout or northern pike. Advanced sinew alternatives include learning to prepare natural materials if available, or selecting modern lines that match traditional properties. Traditional sinew was incredibly strong, flexible in cold water, and didn't freeze to fishing equipment. Modern braided lines with similar properties work well, but avoid monofilament that becomes stiff and brittle in extreme cold. Create traditional jigs by attaching your carved lures to hooks, using techniques that allow natural movement. Traditional attachment methods use sinew wrapping or small holes drilled through lure bodies, creating connections that enhanced rather than restricted lure action. Traditional environmental assessment techniques let you predict fishing success before leaving home. Learn to read atmospheric pressure changes through natural signs. Falling pressure often triggers fish feeding activity, while rising pressure can slow fishing. Traditional weather signs include cloud formations, wind direction changes, and animal behavior patterns. Seasonal timing knowledge helps you position fishing trips during optimal conditions. Traditional calendars based on moon phases, seasonal weather patterns, and environmental changes often prove more accurate than modern weather forecasting for predicting fish activity. Practice reading ice conditions for both safety and fishing success. Traditional knowledge includes understanding how weather affects ice formation, where currents create dangerous areas, and how ice sounds indicate both safety and fish presence below. Implementing strategic hole networks means creating fishing systems rather than individual fishing spots. Traditional approaches coordinate multiple holes to intercept fish movement, covers different depth zones, and provide backup options when fish move or conditions change. Learn communication methods for coordinating with fishing partners across multiple holes. Traditional signals include specific movements, sound signals, and positioning techniques that allow coordinated fishing without scaring fish or compromising safety. This traditional ice assessment method has prevented countless accidents. Here's how it could save your life. Advanced mastery combines traditional knowledge with leadership skills that benefit entire fishing communities while preserving cultural wisdom. Master-level timing involves understanding fish behavior patterns that remain consistent across generations. Traditional knowledge includes reading environmental signs that indicate when fish will be most active, where they'll be positioned, and how they'll respond to different fishing techniques. Advanced practitioners learn to predict fishing success days in advance using traditional environmental indicators. Weather pattern recognition, seasonal timing, and environmental observation skills let you plan fishing trips for maximum effectiveness while avoiding dangerous conditions. Respectful engagement with indigenous communities means supporting traditional knowledge preservation while learning techniques appropriately. Seek opportunities to learn from indigenous knowledge keepers, support indigenous-owned businesses, and contribute to cultural preservation programs. Understanding cultural context means recognizing that traditional techniques represent sophisticated knowledge systems developed through necessity, not recreational preferences. Approach traditional knowledge with respect for the communities that created and maintained these innovations across generations. Modern safety gear supplements traditional knowledge without replacing it. Ice safety picks and rope systems provide emergency self-rescue capabilities. Emergency communication devices ensure help can be summoned if needed. First aid kits adapted for cold weather conditions address injuries and hypothermia risks specific to ice fishing. Cold weather clothing systems use modern materials as backup to traditional approaches. Traditional clothing techniques using natural materials work excellently, but modern synthetic insulation provides additional safety margins in extreme conditions. Ethical sourcing means obtaining traditional materials through legitimate suppliers who harvest sustainably. Hunting supply stores often carry naturally shed antler pieces and ethically sourced bone materials. Craft stores provide bone blanks and carving tools suitable for traditional lure construction. When traditional materials aren't available, choose modern alternatives that maintain traditional properties. Dense hardwoods work better than synthetic plastics in cold conditions. Natural fiber lines maintain flexibility better than synthetic monofilaments in extreme cold. Understanding local ice fishing regulations means researching specific requirements for your fishing locations. Most jurisdictions require standard fishing licenses for ice fishing. No separate ice fishing license exists. Regulations vary significantly between states, provinces, and specific water bodies. Obtain proper licenses before fishing, understand catch limits and seasons, and follow local regulations for hole spacing, shelter requirements, and equipment restrictions. Some areas have specific rules for traditional fishing methods, while others treat them the same as modern techniques. Acknowledging indigenous knowledge sources means properly crediting traditional techniques and supporting communities that developed them. Avoid cultural appropriation by learning techniques respectfully, understanding their cultural significance, and contributing to traditional knowledge preservation. Support indigenous communities through ethical purchasing, cultural program contributions, and respectful engagement with traditional knowledge keepers. Understand that learning traditional techniques carries responsibility to preserve and respect their cultural origins. Traditional lure effectiveness problems usually stem from material quality or construction techniques. Practice carving skills on inexpensive materials before working with premium bone or antler. Test lure action in clear water before using them for fishing. Hole maintenance difficulties often result from inadequate tools or poor understanding of ice conditions. Traditional ice cutting techniques require sharp tools and understanding of ice grain direction. Modern augers work well but require maintenance in extreme cold. Low success rates typically indicate patience development needs or technique refinement requirements. Traditional fishing demands different patience levels than modern approaches. Fish move slower in cold water and require time to respond to lures. Ice safety concerns require developing traditional assessment skills that supplement modern safety equipment. Practice traditional ice evaluation techniques in safe conditions before relying on them in remote locations. Realistic timeline expectations help maintain motivation during skill development. Traditional techniques require practice and environmental awareness that develop over months rather than days. Expect gradual improvement rather than immediate expertise. Finding suitable practice locations means researching local ice fishing opportunities and connecting with experienced practitioners. Local fishing clubs, outdoor education programs, and indigenous cultural centres often provide learning opportunities and mentorship. Complete beginners often experience dramatic success improvements after learning traditional positioning and timing techniques. Many report catching more fish in their first week using traditional methods than in previous years of modern ice fishing. As you embark on this journey of learning traditional techniques, it's essential to understand the cultural heritage you're engaging with and how to practice these methods with proper respect and attribution. When you support Inuit-owned businesses and cultural programs, you're directly contributing to the preservation of 4,000 years of survival wisdom that continues enriching our world today. Learning traditional ice fishing techniques isn't just about catching more fish, it's about engaging respectfully with living cultural knowledge that connects us to sophisticated understanding of Arctic environments developed through countless generations. Picture traditional knowledge keepers patiently teaching these techniques to young community members, ensuring 4,000 years of wisdom continues to the next generation. Your first responsibility as someone learning traditional techniques is understanding proper terminology that honours the people who created and preserved this knowledge. Use Inuit, plural, and Inuk, singular, when referring to these Arctic peoples. These terms mean the people in Inuktitut language, making it redundant to say Inuit people. Avoid the term Eskimo, which many indigenous communities consider outdated and potentially offensive. The Alaska Native Language Center and Inuit Circumpolar Council both prefer Inuit as the current appropriate term. Regional specificity matters deeply in proper attribution. Acknowledge specific communities rather than generalizing. The Inupiat of Alaska, various Canadian Inuit communities, and the Kalaalleq of Greenland each developed regional variations of traditional techniques adapted to this specific environments. When possible, credit the particular community or region where specific techniques originated. Language respect means using traditional terms when available and appropriate, while understanding their cultural significance. Traditional knowledge isn't just practical information. It represents sophisticated understanding of Arctic ecosystems developed through necessity, refined through generations, and maintained through cultural practices that deserve recognition and respect. Knowledge source recognition requires acknowledging that traditional techniques represent collective community knowledge rather than individual innovations. When sharing traditional knowledge, attribute it to the communities that developed and preserved it rather than claiming discovery or minimizing its cultural significance. Feel the weight of responsibility as you realize you're learning survival methods that kept entire cultures alive through the harshest conditions on Earth. Learning traditional techniques creates opportunities and obligations to support the communities that develop this invaluable knowledge. Economic support strategies include purchasing authentic traditional crafts, artwork, and cultural products from Inuit-owned businesses. Authentic indigenous businesses provide genuine cultural experiences while supporting community economic development. Organisations like Indigenous Tourism Canada help identify legitimate Indigenous-owned enterprises that follow ethical cultural sharing practices. Cultural tourism participation means engaging in respectful cultural exchange programs led by Indigenous communities. These programs support communities economically, while preserving cultural knowledge through appropriate sharing with outside learners. Seek experiences that benefit Indigenous communities directly, rather than exploitative ventures that profit from Indigenous culture without community involvement. Educational program support includes contributing to Indigenous-led education initiatives that preserve traditional knowledge while supporting community development. Organisations like the Inuit Circumpolar Council coordinate international programs preserving Inuit culture, advocacy, and traditional knowledge across Arctic regions. Direct community support through contributions to community development and cultural preservation funds helps ensure traditional knowledge continues benefiting Indigenous communities. Many Arctic communities have programs supporting elders who maintain traditional knowledge, youth education initiatives, and cultural preservation projects that could benefit from outside support. Traditional knowledge keepers explain how sharing these techniques respectfully helps ensure they survive for future generations while benefiting the broader world. Your involvement in learning traditional techniques can contribute to preservation efforts that maintain cultural continuity. Documentation support means contributing to oral history preservation projects led by indigenous communities. Academic research that respectfully studies traditional knowledge, when conducted in partnership with indigenous communities, helps maintain accuracy while making traditional knowledge accessible for educational purposes. Participating in cultural documentation efforts led by indigenous communities ensures traditional knowledge is preserved according to community values and priorities. Support projects that respect indigenous intellectual property rights while helping maintain traditional knowledge for future generations. Educational continuity support includes contributing to indigenous youth education programs that teach traditional skills alongside modern education. These programs help young community members maintain connections to traditional knowledge while preparing for contemporary challenges. Intergenerational knowledge transfer programs help connect elders who maintain traditional knowledge with younger community members. Supporting these connections helps ensure traditional knowledge continues within indigenous communities where it originated and belongs. Observe the pride in elders' faces as they see traditional knowledge being respected and preserved by people who understand its true value. Ethical learning requires approaching traditional knowledge with humility that recognizes its depth, sophistication, and cultural significance. Humility in learning means understanding that traditional techniques represent sophisticated knowledge systems developed through life or death necessity over thousands of years. These aren't simple tricks or shortcuts, they are expressions of profound understanding of Arctic environments that modern science is still working to fully comprehend. Cultural context understanding requires appreciating the survival necessity behind traditional techniques. Traditional ice fishing wasn't recreational activity. It was essential knowledge that meant the difference between community survival and starvation during Arctic winters. This context demands respectful approaches that honour the serious nature of traditional knowledge. Avoiding romanticization means understanding traditional life's challenges alongside its remarkable innovations. Traditional Arctic life was extremely demanding, requiring skills, knowledge, and community cooperation that modern technology cannot fully replace. Respect traditional knowledge without idealizing the hardships that made such knowledge necessary. Practical application guidance focuses on using traditional knowledge for legitimate survival, education, and skill development rather than entertainment or commercial exploitation. Learn traditional techniques to understand Arctic environments, develop survival skills, and appreciate indigenous innovations, not to profit from indigenous culture inappropriately. Step into a world where practicing techniques with acknowledgement of their cultural origins becomes part of preserving and honouring traditional knowledge. Respectful practice means understanding which aspects of traditional knowledge have particular cultural significance beyond practical applications. Sacred versus practical elements require understanding that some traditional practices may have ceremonial or spiritual significance beyond their practical functions. Focus on practical survival techniques while maintaining appropriate respect for cultural elements that may have deeper meaning within indigenous communities. Modern application ethics means practicing techniques while acknowledging their cultural origins, teaching others with proper cultural attribution, and contributing to traditional knowledge preservation through respectful practice. Support the communities that developed and maintained these techniques rather than simply extracting knowledge for personal benefit. Here are specific organizations where your support makes a real difference in preserving traditional Arctic knowledge. The Inuit Circumpolar Council coordinates cultural programs and traditional knowledge preservation across Arctic regions. Local indigenous cultural centres and museums often have programs supporting traditional knowledge preservation and community cultural activities. University programs focusing on traditional ecological knowledge provide opportunities to support academic research conducted respectfully in partnership with indigenous communities. Arctic research foundations often have programs combining traditional knowledge with contemporary environmental research while ensuring communities benefit from their participation. With this foundation of respect and cultural understanding, you're ready to take action and begin your own journey with traditional Inuit ice fishing techniques while contributing to their preservation for future generations. Your 30-day challenge starts now. Here's exactly what to do this week to begin mastering these 4,000-year-old techniques that have sustained Arctic communities through the harshest conditions on Earth. This week, take the first concrete steps toward mastering traditional knowledge that could transform your understanding of survival and environmental awareness. Day 1 begins with researching local ice fishing regulations and identifying safe practice locations near you. Most states and provinces require standard fishing licenses for ice fishing, so obtain proper permits while discovering where you can legally practice these techniques. Day 2 focuses on sourcing basic materials for traditional tool crafting. Visit hunting supply stores for ethically sourced bone materials, craft stores for carving tools, and outdoor retailers for natural materials. Many suppliers offer bone blanks perfect for traditional lure carving, while online retailers provide access to traditional materials harvested sustainably. Practice ice assessment techniques on day 3 using any available frozen surface. Even backyard puddles or local ponds provide opportunities to develop traditional ice reading skills. Learn to recognize the visual and audio cues that indicate ice strength, developing sensitivity that could save your life in real Arctic conditions. Create your first traditional bone lure on day 4, connecting with ancestral wisdom through your own hands. Follow traditional carving techniques to shape lures that mimic natural prey fish, understanding how each curve affects underwater movement and fish attraction. Study traditional weather reading signs on day 5, learning to interpret environmental cues that have guided successful fishing for millennia. Practice recognizing atmospheric pressure changes, wind pattern shifts, and natural signs that indicate optimal fishing conditions. Connect with local indigenous cultural organizations on day 6, finding respectful ways to support traditional knowledge preservation while learning about regional indigenous communities. Many cultural centers offer educational programs, workshops, or volunteer opportunities that support cultural preservation. Plan your first traditional technique practice session on day 7, combining everything you've learned into a practical fishing experience that honors traditional methods while maintaining modern safety standards. Complete beginner-level traditional tool crafting projects during weeks 2 through 4, developing skills that connect you with thousands of years of Arctic innovation. Practice hole placement principles using traditional measurements and environmental reading techniques that work regardless of modern equipment availability. Begin developing patience and observation skills essential to traditional methods, qualities that traditional techniques require but modern life rarely cultivates. Traditional fishing demands environmental awareness, timing sensitivity, and patience that transform your relationship with natural environments. Connect with other heritage hacks, community members learning traditional techniques, sharing experiences, and supporting each other's traditional knowledge journey. Online communities provide encouragement, practical advice, and connections with practitioners worldwide who share your interest in preserving traditional wisdom. Support indigenous community cultural preservation programs through ethical purchasing, program contributions, and awareness spreading that ensures traditional knowledge benefits the communities that created and maintained it. Join thousands of Heritage Hacks viewers who are already practicing traditional techniques and contributing to cultural preservation efforts worldwide. Online communities provide platforms for sharing traditional tool crafting progress, participating in virtual learning sessions with traditional knowledge experts, and connecting with local practitioners for in-person learning opportunities. Cultural preservation support includes purchasing authentic products from Indigenous-owned businesses, contributing to traditional knowledge documentation projects, and participating in Indigenous-led cultural education programs that preserve traditional wisdom while supporting community development. Traditional knowledge extends far beyond ice fishing into comprehensive survival systems that sustained Arctic communities for thousands of years. Explore ancient Arctic navigation techniques that allowed travel across vast distances without modern instruments, traditional shelter construction methods that outperform modern camping equipment, and weather prediction techniques more accurate than modern meteorology. Traditional food preservation methods, fire-making techniques, and water purification systems represent additional aspects of comprehensive traditional knowledge systems that remain relevant for modern survival applications and environmental understanding. Every time you use these traditional techniques, you're connecting with 4,000 years of human ingenuity and survival mastery. You're not just learning to catch fish, you're becoming part of an unbroken chain of knowledge that has sustained families up through the harshest conditions on Earth. By learning, practicing, and respectfully sharing these techniques, you're ensuring that this incredible wisdom survives for future generations. You're becoming a guardian of traditional knowledge that could one day save lives and preserve cultural heritage that connects us all to our shared human capacity for innovation and survival. The ancestors who developed these techniques survived and thrived in conditions that would challenge our most advanced modern technology. Their wisdom lives on through you, carry it forward with respect, practice it with dedication, and share it with the reverence it deserves.